I was cleaning old hard drives that afternoon. One of those quiet chores you do when the house finally stops making noise. A folder caught my eye. Family Picnic, 2014. The name alone made my chest ache. That was the last summer before my son moved away, before everything splintered. I clicked it open. The first picture froze me. There I was, standing in the garden, smiling, holding a paper cup of lemonade. And right beside me stood my granddaughter. Only one problem: she wasn't born until 3 years later. For a moment, I thought my eyes blurred from age or grief. I zoomed in. The child's curls, the dimple on her cheek, the tiny scar above her eyebrow. I knew them all by heart. I felt the blood drain from my face. The cursor trembled over her little hand holding mine. It was my hand, my ring, my blouse from that year. But that child couldn't have been there. My ears began to ring. Somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed like a pulse I couldn't match. I whispered, "This can't be real." "Maybe you just remember it wrong," my daughter-in-law said later, when I showed her the screen. Her voice was smooth, like she'd rehearsed it. I stared at her calm, almost bored expression. "No," I said quietly. "A woman can forget dates, recipes, faces of neighbors, but not her own face in a picture." She shrugged, reached for the laptop, and said something about AI filters. Maybe Google Photos messed up the timeline. I didn't answer. I was still watching that photo. Our smiles perfectly aligned, as if someone had stitched time together and ironed out the truth. The smell of burnt coffee drifted from the pot. Outside, a lawnmower started, loud and steady, cutting through the silence between us. I sat alone after she left, the glow of the screen fading into gray. My hand still felt warm where that impossible child had held it. And in that stillness, something inside me shifted. A slow, cold realization crawling up the back of my neck. Someone had edited my memories. Not roughly, not cruelly, with such tenderness that I almost believed the lie. That was the first time I truly feared a photograph. My name is Clara Voss, 63 years old. Before my hands began to tremble, I used to work as a funeral portrait restorer, the person who fixed cracks on photographs of the dead so their families could remember them smiling. 17 years of retouching faces that would never age again. 246 commissions. Almost 200 million dongs spent on film rolls, frame wood, black suits, white lilies, coffee for grieving relatives. All of it paid quietly, never reimbursed, never even mentioned in the family group chat. People used to say I had the softest hands in town. Maybe because I learned to touch sadness gently. I started the job after my husband left and my son was still in school. Back then I had one old Canon, a borrowed lens, and a heart that believed kindness always came back. When neighbors couldn't afford a funeral photo, I did it for free. When my sister's husband died, I stayed up 3 nights straight restoring his image, pixel by pixel. That's what I did best. Erase flaws, hide pain, make everything look peaceful. I suppose that's what they later did to me. My son, Aaron, was my only child. A quiet boy with camera-shy eyes. He grew up helping me carry tripods, learning to adjust light without saying much. When he married, I told myself I'd finally rest. Then, 3 years later, he was gone. A car crash on a foggy bridge. At the funeral, I couldn't cry. I just stared at the blown-up photo on the altar, the one I had taken, and realized my own work was now staring back at me. From that day, I stopped photographing strangers. I kept one promise instead. I'd save for his daughter, the baby his wife carried when he died. That child became my reason to keep breathing, one frame at a time. Every month I transferred money, tuition fund, medical fund, miscellaneous fund. I sold 2 cameras, the Nikon and the Fuji. I let go of my apartment in Dallas to move closer to them. I told no one how much, but I wrote every figure in a small notebook. 17 years of work. 246 portraits, 98,000, 17 million D spent on family obligations. A ledger of devotion. If love had receipts, I kept them all. Sometimes, late at night, I'd scroll through old photos just to see my granddaughter smile. She looked like Erin. Same eyes, same habit of tilting her head when thinking. When she was born, I took a picture of her tiny fingers wrapped around my thumb. That photo used to calm me on bad days, until the day I found another one. The wrong one. The one where time itself was forged. Looking back now, I wonder if I taught them too well. I showed my daughter-in-law how to balance light, how to make skin glow, how to heal a blemish without leaving a trace. She learned fast, faster than I expected. Editing, I told her, is a moral decision. You can remove dust, not truth. She laughed. Then you've never met a client who wanted to look alive again. At the time, I thought it was just a joke. People think grief makes you wiser. It doesn't. It just makes you quieter. I didn't see the little warnings. The missing albums, the renamed folders, the subtle reshaping of our family story online. I was too busy surviving, too busy believing the best of them. Maybe I needed to. Maybe I couldn't bear the idea that someone who shared my blood would repaint the past. Now, every time I open that 2014 folder, I feel the same chill crawling through me. The digital noise around the edges of that photo, the faint mismatch of shadows. I recognize the pattern. It's my own brushwork. Whoever did it used my old restoration style. The same way I used to revive the faces of the dead. That's what hurts the most. When I was young, I believed photographs never lied. But maybe that's because I wanted to believe in something that didn't betray me. Now, I know better. I used to trust that a photograph couldn't lie until I saw my own face pasted into a memory that never happened. I was 25 when I first pointed a camera at myself. Not a phone camera, not a mirror selfie. An old Nikon FM2, secondhand, the kind that clicked like a door latch every time you pressed the shutter. Back then, I wasn't Clara, the portrait restorer. I was just a girl trying to pay off a mountain of debt left by my father's illness. I photographed weddings for cash, 12 hours of forced smiles, sore feet, and sweat dripping into the viewfinder. Each weekend, I borrowed the same lace gloves so the brides could pretend they were new. I still remember the smell, wilted flowers, hairspray, cheap perfume masking exhaustion. At night, I developed the rolls in a rented darkroom behind a photo shop near the bus station. The owner, Mr. Hung, called it the place where light gets tamed. He was half right. Light can be tamed, but it never obeys. One evening, after shooting a wedding that ended in a drunken fight, I stood in front of the shop mirror waiting for the last print to dry. My face in the glass looked unfamiliar. Streaks of developer on my cheek, mascara washed away, eyes older than 25. I lifted the Nikon and, without thinking, took the shot me facing myself. The flash bouncing off the mirror so that for a split second, the girl and the woman in the reflection merged. That photo became my secret. I never showed it to anyone. It wasn't beautiful. It was honest. Half of me blurred by the flash, half of me staring straight into the lens as if I'd caught myself stealing time. Years later, whenever I restored portraits for the bereaved, I kept that picture tucked inside my toolbox, between the cotton gloves and the lens cloth. On nights when grief smelled like bleach and roses, I'd unfold it just to remember who I used to be. The girl who once faced herself and didn't flinch. Funny how a mirror keeps both sides of a person, the one living in front of it, and the one waiting behind the glass. That image followed me through everything. The hunger years, the long days raising Erin alone, even the first time I saw my granddaughter's sonogram. Sometimes I think that's where the trouble started. The idea that a camera could hold two realities at once. The one we show, and the one that looks back. When I saw the doctored photo in that family picnic 2014 folder, it struck the same chord. The shadows didn't match because someone had flipped them mirror style. It was as if the lie had borrowed my old trick. Make reflection look like truth. That mirror photo is still hidden in a sealed envelope under my pillow. I haven't opened it in years, afraid the film might have faded. But I can see it perfectly in my mind. The flash like a wound of light, my left eye half closed, my mouth caught between laughter and fear. The girl in the picture is still asking me something. Maybe she's asking what happened to the woman she was supposed to become. It started quietly, like a picture loading one pixel at a time. One night I couldn't sleep. The house was too silent, too perfect. So I did what old women do when their minds won't rest. I scrolled through Facebook. My granddaughter had just turned 16. Her mother had posted a photo of her blowing candles. The comments were all hearts and blessings. I was about to leave one too when I saw the date. June 12, 2013. That couldn't be right. The girl wasn't even born yet. I blinked, refreshed the page. The same date stayed. The same picture. The same face I loved, staring back from a year that didn't exist. I scrolled further down the profile, and the unease grew like a pulse under my skin. Every family picture I remembered had two versions now. One slightly brighter, smoother, happier, and all of them carrying wrong timestamps. The picnic from 2016 now said 2014. The trip to Dalat, where Aaron had been alive, was listed as 2012. It was as if someone had peeled off the original years and glued on new ones. I tried to laugh at myself. Maybe I'd mixed up dates. Maybe Facebook's archive glitched. Still, my fingers were trembling when I called my daughter-in-law. "Why does it say 2013?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She chuckled softly, that polite managerial tone she always used when explaining technology to the elderly. "Probably a syncing issue, Mom. Old phones, new uploads, sometimes metadata goes crazy." I hated that word, metadata. It sounded like something that erased meaning and replaced it with code. I said, "But the photo wasn't taken until—" She cut me off, gentle but sharp. "Please don't worry about little things like that. You know how you get nostalgic." Nostalgic. Such a soft word for being dismissed. After we hung up, I stared at the screen again. If it was really just an error, why did every altered photo make me look a little thinner, my skin smoother, my hair more silver in a flattering way? Why did Aaron look less like a man and more like a digital ghost, perfect edges, no blur? And the strangest part, in some of those images, I could see reflections that didn't belong. Tiny distortions in glass windows or spoons. A hand that wasn't mine. A figure half-cropped behind a chair. It wasn't a glitch. It was an edit. I opened the albums one by one, like exhuming bodies. There were duplicates everywhere. Family Christmas, Aaron's graduation, Mom's birthday. Each had two folders, one labeled original, one corrected. Corrected? That word hit harder than any insult. I opened the corrected folder and saw something that made my stomach tighten. It was the picture from Aaron's last birthday, him holding the cake, laughing. Except in this version, my hands had been erased. The shadow where I had stood was gone. The person behind the retouching hadn't just changed dates, they had trimmed me out piece by piece. I sat there in the dark, only the glow of the monitor lighting my face. Somewhere, the fridge hummed again. I imagined the sound of the mouse click that had rewritten my family history. Calm, surgical, without guilt. I closed the laptop but could still feel its warmth on my palms, like holding something that could burn you if you dared to open it again. When memories can be edited with a few clicks, I thought, who still holds the truth? Every year, on the anniversary of Aaron's death, my daughter-in-law hosts a memorial dinner. She calls it a celebration of his light. I've stopped correcting her. Grief, for some people, needs rebranding to stay marketable. This year felt different from the start. The dining room was staged like a gallery, candles lined up with surgical precision, the air thick with expensive perfume and nostalgia. My granddaughter had set up a projector and laptop against the far wall. "We made something special this year, Grandma," she said, her smile nervous, her eyeliner smudged at the corners. The slideshow started. Soft piano music filled the room. The first photo flashed onto the screen, and my body froze before my mind could catch up. There it was. The forged picture from that cursed folder. Me and the granddaughter that wasn't born yet, standing under the apricot tree, holding paper cups of lemonade. The image glowed huge and beautiful, the color slightly oversaturated, the lie magnified. Everyone gasped softly, murmuring about how young Mom looked and how sweet that day was. My daughter-in-law clasped her hands, whispering, "Our favorite memory." I didn't move. The room swayed, but my feet were nailed to the tile. My pulse thudded in my throat. I wanted to scream, "That never happened!" But grief doesn't give you language, it gives you static. The music went on. One photo melted into another. Birthdays, picnics, smiles that weren't mine anymore. Somewhere between frame 3 and 4, I realized I had been erased in half of them. Replaced by a neat crop, a new background, a shadow that didn't belong to me. It wasn't just my absence, it was an edited version of love. The man who'd held my hand, my son, looked towards someone else now. And they painted over me. "Isn't it beautiful?" someone said behind me. "Yes, she really outdid herself this year," another replied. Their voices merged into the same syrupy hum people use at funerals when they've already moved on. My granddaughter looked at me from across the room, eyes wide, uncertain. She must have seen the tremor in my hands, the way my jaw tightened. The air felt too thick. The candles flickered. I reached for my glass of red wine, something to steady me, but my finger slipped. It fell, slow as in a dream. The crystal hit the edge of the table, cracked, and splashed across the white projector screen. The wine bloomed like blood, spreading over my son's smiling face. For a heartbeat, the room went silent. Then the gasps came. Chairs scraped. Someone shouted for towels. My daughter-in-law rushed forward, horror painted over her polite smile. "Mom, the equipment, what have you done?" I could barely hear her. My eyes stayed locked on the screen where the crimson stain bled through Erin's image, turning it back into something real, something raw. "I didn't spill it," I said quietly. "I returned it to the right color." She blinked. "Excuse me?" I pointed at the screen, my voice trembling but clear. "That picture never happened. That's not my granddaughter. That's not that year. You built a ghost and called it memory." Whispers filled the room. Someone muttered, "Maybe she's confused again." I turned to them, my throat burning. "Confused?" I repeated. "You think I don't know the day my own child was alive?" The room fell still. Even the music seemed to hold its breath. My daughter-in-law's face hardened, the soft sympathy cracking. "Mom, you're tired," she said in that careful tone. The one that sounds kind but means shut up. "It's just a photo. No one meant anything by it." "Exactly," I said. "No one meant anything by it, and that's the problem. You've made nothing mean everything." Her jaw twitched. "We only wanted to remember him happy." "Then remember him," I said, "not your version of him." The wine had started dripping down the screen, streaking through the slideshow until it looked like the photographs themselves were weeping. Somewhere in the middle of it all, I started to laugh. A small, helpless sound that broke into a sob. They didn't understand why. How could they? They were clapping for a ghost, crying over an illusion. I gathered my bag and left before the next slide appeared. Outside, the night air felt like oxygen after drowning. I sat on the porch steps, hands shaking, the faint echo of piano still leaking through the walls. For a long while, I just stared at my reflection in the dark window, my face warped, doubled, alive. And then I whispered to the glass, as if it could still hear me. They didn't just erase me from memory, they replaced the one person who truly loved me. The morning after the memorial, I woke up to silence thick enough to taste. The scent of burnt wax still clung to my hair. I hadn't washed off the wine stains on my hands. They looked like bruises that refused to fade. For hours, I sat by the window, watching light crawl across the floor. That same light I once worshipped through my camera lens. It used to mean beauty, clarity, proof. Now, it only reminded me of exposure. Everything in that slideshow had been curated. Not to remember, but to control the past. My son's laughter, my granddaughter's birth, my own face, rearranged into a story where I was just an extra in someone else's script. And I realized something terrifying. If they could rewrite Erin's life, they could rewrite mine too. The first thing I did was turn on my computer. My finger hovered over the login box of the family's shared cloud drive. The one I paid for, maintained, updated for years. It contained every photo, every scanned document, every digital echo of our family. I took a deep breath and opened the settings. Remove shared access. Change administrator. Reset password. Each click felt like a heartbeat. The confirmation pop-up appeared. Are you sure you want to revoke all access? Yes. The screen blinked, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something like ownership. Not of property, but of memory. My phone started buzzing a few minutes later. First, a message from my daughter-in-law. Mom, did you change the settings? We can't open the photos. Then another. Maybe it's a glitch? Could you check? Then, the tone sharpened. Mom, we need those files for the family archive. Please fix it today. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app. Every month, I'd been transferring money to her account. For maintenance, for education, for family expenses. It was automatic. Invisible generosity. My thumb hovered over the recurring transfer. Delete. It felt small, almost cruel, but necessary, like cutting off a tumor before it spreads. The house grew so quiet that even the creak of the chair sounded accusatory. Part of me expected guilt to come flooding in, but what I felt was release. For 17 years, I'd kept the family's images safe. Now, I would keep myself safe. I backed up only one thing. My original photo. The mirror self-portrait from when I was 25. I printed a new copy, larger, sharper. When it emerged from the printer, still warm and smelling of ink, I traced the outline of that young woman's jawline. Her eyes met mine as if asking, "What took you so long?" That afternoon, I walked to the local camera shop. The same one where I used to buy film. The owner's son recognized me instantly. "Mrs. Voss? Haven't seen you in years. I need a camera," I said. "Something simple, manual. No filters, no Wi-Fi, no cloud." He smiled, half confused. "That's old school. Most people just use their phones now." "Exactly," I said. "That's why I won't." I bought a used Nikon, nearly identical to the one I'd owned decades ago. The weight of it in my hands felt like coming home. When I stepped outside, the afternoon light flared across the lens. For a moment, I lifted the camera, aimed it at the reflection in the shop window, and clicked. No filter, no edit, just me, alive, imperfect, present. On the way back, my phone buzzed again. A new message. "Mom, you're acting irrational. We're family. Why are you being so dramatic over a photo?" I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I typed slowly, "Because it wasn't a photo. It was my life. And you photoshopped me out of it." I didn't press send. Instead, I deleted the message and powered off the phone. Some truths don't need to be delivered. They just need to be lived. That night, I opened my new journal and wrote down one sentence. "If they can steal my memories, I will make new ones. This time, through my own lens." The room smelled faintly of developer and dust, the way my studio once did. I placed the freshly printed mirror photograph on the desk, leaned the new camera beside it, and whispered, "Almost a vow. No one else gets to press save on my life again. For 3 days, nothing. No calls, no footsteps on the porch, no messages until the 4th evening." The sun had just gone down, the sky turning the same deep blue I used to mix in my photobaths. The air outside smelled like rain and burnt dust. Inside, the house felt hollow, as if someone had taken half the oxygen with them. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my granddaughter. "Grandma Clara, why did you delete the shared album? Mom says you don't want to see me anymore." I read it 3 times. The words rearranged themselves into guilt. 16 years old. Too young to understand manipulation, old enough to feel abandoned. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't know what to type. How do you tell a child she's standing inside a lie, that the world she scrolls through has been retouched? I typed, deleted, typed again. "It's not about you, sweetheart." Backspaced it. Too vague. I just needed some time. Deleted that too. Too cowardly. Finally, I wrote nothing. I just stared at her message until the screen dimmed and my reflection appeared on the glass. An old woman blurred into pixels. The next morning, the silence continued. Usually my daughter-in-law's voice filled the hallway. Quick, efficient, like the clicking of nails on a keyboard. Now, nothing. No good morning text. No invitation to lunch. Only the mechanical hum of the refrigerator, steady as a metronome marking absence. It reminded me of the days after Aaron's funeral. People afraid to say the wrong thing, so they said nothing at all. The silence didn't heal then, and it wasn't healing now. On the third day, I went out to water the small garden behind the house. The soil smelled wet and metallic, the kind of scent that sticks to grief. From the open window upstairs came the faint sound of my granddaughter's laughter. A clipped, polite giggle I didn't recognize. I looked up. She was filming something with her phone, her face half hidden behind the screen. When she noticed me, she froze for a heartbeat, then waved awkwardly. I waved back. A second later, the curtain fell shut. Inside, the air had that dense stillness of a studio right before the flash goes off charged, waiting, pretending to be calm. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping cold tea, staring at the wine-stained tablecloth I hadn't bothered to wash since the memorial night. The crimson blot had turned brown, a bruise on fabric. Part of me wanted to clean it, another part wanted to leave it there as evidence. Proof that something real had spilled once. Something that couldn't be photoshopped away. That evening, a delivery arrived. A small box at the gate, no note. Inside were the framed prints I'd ordered of my old mirror self-portrait. When I hung it in the living room, the young woman in the picture stared back at me with defiance, half her face lit by flash, the other half lost in shadow. She looked unafraid of silence. Maybe that's what this was, a test. Not of patience, but of presence. Around midnight, my phone lit up again. Another message. This time from my daughter-in-law. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this distance is hurting everyone. Maybe you should rest. Let us handle the memories. The freezing made me laugh quiet. Bitter laughter that tasted like dust. Handle the memories. As if they were accounts to be managed, edited, branded. I didn't reply. I walked to the mirror photograph and whispered to the girl in it. They think quiet means surrender. But it's just the sound before the shutter clicks. The house exhaled softly, wood creaking, pipes murmuring, old structures warning of pressure building inside. Even the air felt heavy, waiting for confrontation. And somewhere deep down, I knew this stillness wasn't peace. It was the pause right before the flash, the calm before the image breaks open. I knew she'd come. The silence had lasted too long to be peace. That afternoon, the sky hung low, colorless, like old film left too long in the developer. When the knock came, it wasn't loud. Just 3 polite taps, evenly spaced. I opened the door to find her. My daughter-in-law. Standing on the porch in her beige work blazer, holding a laptop against her chest like a shield. Her perfume arrived before her voice. Mom, she said softly, almost too kindly. We need to talk. She walked in without waiting to be invited. Her heels clicked against the floorboards, precise, rehearsed. I could already feel the storm she carried inside that laptop. She sat down at the kitchen table, the same spot where I used to teach her how to crop and color balance photos years ago. Funny how tables never forget, even when people pretend to. Coffee? I asked. She blinked. No, thank you. Let's just clear the air. I nodded. By all means, show me what you've brought. She flipped open the laptop. The familiar glow of the family archive filled the room, folder names, thumbnails, smiling faces. There's been a misunderstanding, she began, her voice dipped in honey. You've restricted access to the family photos. That's fine. It's your right. But those files are part of our shared history. You can't just erase them. The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't erase them, I said. I saved them from being erased. She sighed. Mom, come on, nobody erased you. We only adjusted the photos a bit, for clarity, color, framing. You know how old photos get pixelated? I just wanted to make them beautiful again. I leaned forward. Beautiful? She nodded eagerly, relieved at what she thought was agreement. I pointed at the screen. You call this beautiful? There, in the center, was that forged picture. Me and the unborn granddaughter, smiling in false sunlight. My throat tightened. Tell me, I said, what's the color code for truth in your editing software? Warm tone? Sepia? Or did you filter that out too? She closed the laptop halfway. Mom, please, you're overreacting. It's not that deep. I stared at her. Not that deep? You splice time. You turned grief into decor. Her expression hardened. I was trying to honor Aaron. No, I whispered. You were trying to own him. The air in the kitchen thickened. Outside, wind pushed against the windows, making them rattle like a warning. She folded her arms. Look, we both know you're not as sharp as you used to be. Sometimes memories mix up. I thought fixing the timeline would help. My voice dropped low. So you rewrote my memories because you thought I couldn't tell the difference? I didn't rewrite anything, she snapped. I corrected mistakes. I let out a bitter laugh. And what mistake was that? That I existed? Her cheeks flushed. That's not fair. Fair? I said. I buried my son and paid for your roof. I kept every photo safe, every memory. And you deleted me frame by frame, then smiled for the camera like nothing happened. Her eyes flickered, guilt mixed with defiance. You're being dramatic. I learned from the best, I said quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder. Official-looking, crisp white paper clipped neatly at the top. She pushed it across the table. This is a simple authorization, she said. It transfers rights of digital management to me, so I can continue the family archive project. Just a formality. I didn't touch it. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. She smiled. Then we might have confusion later, especially if we ever need to use the photos legally. You know, family trusts, inheritance, the house. There it was. The subtext she'd been circling around since the first knock. Not memory. Control. I picked up the paper, my name printed neatly on top. Authorization of family visual assets. Each word polished, professional, designed to sound harmless. You always did know how to make theft sound elegant, I said. Mom, that's offensive. What do you call changing dates on a man's life? Repainting the truth? She opened her mouth, but I was already standing. I walked to the drawer near the window, the one where I kept my old documents, and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside was the only piece of paper that ever mattered. The original copyright form I'd signed years ago when creating the family archive. It listed me as the sole custodian. I laid it next to her new authorization. One of these, I said, was written out of love. The other out of fear. She crossed her arms. You can't keep everything, Clara. I smiled, the kind of smile people mistake for surrender. You're right. I picked up both papers. Then, slowly, deliberately, I tore the new authorization clean in half. The sound echoed louder than any argument we'd ever had. You can have the house, I said evenly. The furniture. The keys. But not my memories. Her face went pale. Mom, that's not what I cut her off. You can own walls, not what lived inside them. She stood there, frozen, mouth slightly open, the laptop still glowing faintly between us. The smell of ozone filled the air as thunder rolled outside. Do you realize how this makes you look? She asked finally. People will think you've lost it. I leaned in close enough for her to see the steadiness in my eyes. Then let them. It's better to be called mad than edited. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Outside, the wind had started to pick up, leaves skittering across the porch. Finally, she gathered her papers, snapped the laptop shut, and said, Fine. Keep your secrets. But don't expect us to keep pretending. I watched her walk to the door, her heels striking the wood like a metronome. Pretending, I said softly, was always your department. She stopped, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. When she finally left, the door clicked shut with a calmness that hurt more than a slam. The rain began soon after. A steady percussion on the roof. I sat back down at the table, bits of torn paper scattered like snowflakes. The wine stain still marked the cloth, now joined by fragments of ink and signature. I felt something strange rising in me. Not rage, not sorrow, but a clarity so sharp it almost burned. For years I'd been restoring other people's photographs, hiding cracks, softening scars. Now I realized, some images shouldn't be repaired. They should be left broken, proof that something real once fractured there. I took out my camera, set it on the table, and turned it toward myself. No filters, no editing, no erasing, just the raw reflection of an old woman who finally stopped apologizing for existing. The shutter clicked once. In that small explosion of light, I felt free. They didn't come back the next day, or the one after that. Silence again, but this time it wasn't the kind that waits. It was the kind that spreads. The phone stopped ringing. The group chat, family moments forever, went quiet. Then, little by little, messages began to appear again, but without me in them. I wasn't removed, I was ignored. It's strange how exclusion doesn't happen with noise. It happens with absence. The sound of other people talking when you shouldn't hear them anymore. A week later, Mrs. Han, my neighbor, came over with her usual basket of mangoes. She stayed on the porch longer than usual, shifting from one foot to the other. "I heard," she began carefully, "that you haven't been feeling well." "Is that true?" I frowned. "Who told you that?" She hesitated. "Your daughter-in-law stopped by the pharmacy yesterday. She said you've been confused lately, forgetting things. Something about mixing up old photos?" I stared at her, the words landing like slow poison. "She's worried," Mrs. Han added quickly. "Said, you've been deleting family albums by mistake. But don't worry, dear, that happens at our age." I smiled. The polite, brittle kind that cracks on the edges. "Thank you, Mrs. Han," I said. "You're very kind." When she left, I locked the door and turned the bolt twice. The next few days unfolded like a smear campaign disguised as compassion. Cousins called to check in. Old colleagues messaged to see how I was coping. Every question was wrapped in concern but carried the same undertone. "Are you losing your mind?" Someone even suggested I get evaluated, just to be safe. By the end of the week, my world had shrunk to 4 walls and the hum of my refrigerator. I could almost hear them whispering online, framing me as the tragic old woman who'd let grief twist her memory. One night, unable to sleep, I searched my own name. It was there, on a local Facebook group for community support. A post by my daughter-in-law. "If anyone sees my mother-in-law wandering around the old photo district, please let me know. She's not dangerous, just confused. She's been collecting strangers' negatives, thinking they're ours. Pray for her. Alzheimer's is cruel." Underneath, a flood of sympathetic comments. "Poor thing, so sad. She was such a talented photographer once." My hands went cold. I could almost hear them burying me alive under pity. But the truth was simpler and sharper. I had gone back to the old photo district. Not to wander, not to steal, to reclaim. Because in one of the shops, a place I used to rent darkroom space in 30 years ago, I'd seen a sign. "For sale. Old photo equipment. Cheap." The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Fixer fluid, acetate, and nostalgia. The young clerk looked up. "We're closing, ma'am. Everything must go." "How much for the enlarger and the drying racks?" I asked. He blinked. "You sure you know how to use those?" I smiled faintly. "Better than most." He shrugged. "They're yours if you can haul them out." That's how I ended up buying the entire Photoshop. Its cracked tiles, rusted sinks, and all. No one noticed. They were too busy discussing my mental decline. Maybe that helped me. People don't suspect the insane of having plans. Every morning I unlocked the shop's back door and slicked into the dim light. I cleaned the counters, wiped the lenses, tested the bulbs. One by one, I hung strings across the room for drawing prints. The walls still carried ghosts, faded photos of strangers, half-developed negatives stuck to the walls. I didn't throw them away. I cataloged them. Each roll of film, each damaged photo, went into a box labeled Resurrection. By the second week, I'd found what I was looking for. The old hard drives and USB sticks where my son's original photos had once been stored before the family archive existed. The files were corrupted, unreadable. But I knew recovery software better than grief counselors. Night after night, I sat under the flickering fluorescent light, coaxing broken pixels back to life. Faces emerged, raw, imperfect, honest. The original colors were duller, the edges soft, but they were real. Aaron's laugh without filters. My wrinkled hand on his shoulder. The version of love that hadn't been airbrushed. Every recovered image felt like a rescue. Meanwhile, the world outside continued its quiet persecution. At the grocery store, the cashier avoided eye contact. At church, whispers trailed behind me like camera flashes. Even my closest friend, Eliza, called one night with her voice trembling. "Clara, I don't know what's happening, but people are saying you're making things up, that you're seeing pictures that aren't there." "Do you believe them?" I asked. A long pause. "I don't know what to believe anymore." That answer hurt worse than all the rumors combined. Sometimes, I caught my reflection in the darkroom glass and barely recognized the woman staring back. Was this how they wanted me to appear? A lonely ghost clinging to negatives no one cared to develop? But as the first batch of photos dried, curling slightly at the edges, I realized something powerful. If they could manipulate digital truth, I could resurrect analog honesty. The more they spread lies about me, the stronger my resolve grew. I started keeping a diary of every visit to the shop. Dates, details, fragments of conversations I overheard, names of those repeating the rumors. It wasn't paranoia. It was evidence. Once, I saw my daughter-in-law's car parked across the street. She sat inside, pretending to be on her phone, watching me through the windshield. I walked right up to her window and knocked. She rolled it down halfway. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," she said. "You're just making it worse." "For who?" I asked. "For everyone," she replied. "For yourself." I leaned closer. "Then maybe it's time everyone saw what really happened." Her eyes flickered, the first hint of fear I'd seen in months. After that, she didn't follow me again. Instead, the attacks went digital. Fake posts, doctored messages, whispers disguised as concern. Every time someone tried to discredit me, I printed another recovered photograph and pinned it to the wall of the shop. Each one was a piece of my defense. A mosaic of truth forming in silence. It took me almost 2 months to finish the restoration. By then, the rumors had solidified into a reputation. Poor Clara. She's lost touch with reality. Good. Let them believe it. Mad women are invisible until they decide not to be. The last photo I restored was the most painful. A candid shot of Aaron sitting at the dining table, eyes half closed, mid-laughter. Behind him, sunlight poured through the curtains like a halo. I hadn't seen that version in years. In the edited slideshow, they'd brightened his smile and cropped me out completely. Here, in the original, you could see my reflection in the glass cabinet behind him. Small, blurred, but there. That reflection became my proof. My presence. My anchor. I made a print, large, unretouched, glossy. I hung it in the center of the shop. It was imperfect, but it was true. Outside, life went on. The family posting polished memories, friends reposting condolences for a woman who wasn't dead yet. But inside that dim little Photoshop, something was shifting. Every photograph I restored whispered the same thing. They think they've buried you. They've only developed you in the dark. I looked around the room. Rows of prints, faces reborn under red light. The air smelled of fixer and defiance. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. Foreshadowing, I began planning quietly. A gallery opening. Not online. In person. Where no one could edit, crop, or filter the truth. I even had a name for it, The Truth Remembers Faces. Because soon, I promised myself, the world would see what they'd tried to erase. It happened by accident, as most betrayals do. I was at the Photoshop one evening, printing a batch of recovered pictures when the printer jammed again. The old machine groaned, spitting out half a sheet with lines of broken ink. To fix it, I borrowed a USB drive from the shop's old drawer, one I hadn't checked before. When I plugged it into the computer, a new folder appeared. Hearts for Heritage Project. The name sounded familiar. I clicked it open. There they were, my photographs, the ones I'd restored, cropped, signed. But they were no longer mine. Each image had been renamed Portrait of Widow C, Elderly Artist in Decline, documenting Alzheimer's through art. My stomach turned cold. Each file came with a caption written in a voice that wasn't mine. Polite, pitiful, designed for pity. Clara Voss, 63, once a talented photographer, now battles dementia. Her family runs this small charity to preserve her fading memories through restoration workshops. Donations welcome. At the bottom of every image, a watermark glowed faintly. The Voss Family Foundation. There was no foundation. There was just my daughter-in-law. I scrolled through page after page. Emails, payment receipts, donation logs. People had sent money. Real money. Thousands. They thought they were helping a poor, fading widow keep her legacy alive. Meanwhile, the woman running the campaign was using my face as her brand. Every photo, my hands holding a camera, my silhouette by the window, even the mirror self-portrait, had been repurposed into proof of a disease I didn't have. They had turned me into a charity case. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The cursor blinked on the screen, waiting, as if asking, "Now what?" I leaned back in my chair, the fluorescent light flickering above, my heartbeat echoing through the shop. This was more than humiliation. This was theft of dignity. It wasn't enough that she'd edited me out of our family, now she'd sold what was left. When the shock settled, anger followed, slow and clean, like film emerging in water. I printed one of the campaign posters and pinned it to the wall next to Erin's real photo. Then I called her. She answered on the third ring, her tone too calm. "Mom, I'm in a meeting. Can I call you later?" "No," I said. "You'll listen now." A pause. "What's wrong?" "You used my pictures," I said. "The charity. The donations. You used me." "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie," I said quietly. "I've seen it. The project, Hearts for Heritage. You used my work and told people I'm losing my mind." There was silence on the other end, then a soft, rehearsed sigh. "Oh, Mom, it's just marketing. People like stories. We needed a way to raise awareness." "For what?" I asked. "For stealing? Please don't be dramatic. It's harmless. It even helps you. We're keeping your name alive." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "My name was never dead," she laughed lightly. "Mom, you're overreacting. You know how online fundraising works. Everyone embellishes a bit. It's not personal." I opened my eyes, staring at the glowing poster on the wall. My own face smiled back at me. Serene, fragile, dying. "Not personal?" I repeated. "You took my face and told strangers I was disappearing. You didn't just steal my work. You sold people's sympathy for profit." Her tone cooled. "Lower your voice, please. This conversation is going nowhere." "Nowhere," I said. "No, it's going exactly where it should." She tried to end the call. I didn't let her. "You've been talking about legacy, about preserving Aaron's memory. But you're the one burying him under lies. You're selling grief like it's stock footage." "Mom, enough," she snapped. "If you keep making accusations like this, I'll have to involve someone. Maybe your doctor." And that was the moment it clicked. The entire narrative she'd built was a trap. If I fought back, she'd point to the charity files and say, "See? She's confused. She doesn't remember agreeing to it." A perfect crime, wrapped in sympathy. I lowered my voice until it was barely more than a whisper. "You think you're clever," I said, "but you've forgotten one thing." "What's that?" "I keep copies." Then I hung up. My hands trembled, but my mind was sharp, sharper than it had been in years. I went through every folder, every receipt, screenshot, transfer record. I printed them, one by one, until the shop's air smelled of ink and vengeance. On the wall behind my desk, I pinned the evidence like a detective board: fake captions, altered dates, donation totals. In the center, I pinned one quote from the campaign. The one that hurt most: "Clara's memory is fading, but through her art, her family carries her truth." I took a pen and scrawled beneath it, "My memory is fine. It's yours that's missing." That night, as I turned off the lights in the shop, the reflection in the dark-room window caught my eye again. My face, lined, alert, alive, shimmered under the faint red glow. And in that reflection, my eyes gleamed the way they used to when I caught a perfect exposure, the kind of light that couldn't be faked. It wasn't madness. It was focus. I whispered to my reflection, steady as the click of a shutter, "You didn't just steal my memories. You sold the compassion that was meant for me." Then I smiled. Small, knowing, unafraid. Because now I had proof. And like any good photograph, proof only gets clearer the longer it's developed. I didn't sleep that night. The walls of the Photoshop were breathing with light. Prints hanging from every string, swaying gently under the small fan. It looked like a congregation of ghosts waiting to testify. The evidence was all there. The forged photos, the edited smiles, the charity posters that turned my grief into advertisement. But proof, I realized, means nothing when it's whispered. It has to be shown. That was when the idea took shape. Not vengeance. Revelation. If they had built a world of edited memories, I would build a stage for the unedited ones. I pulled out my old ledger, the one I used to record clients and photo orders, and began sketching a layout. Each page became a blueprint. Section 1. Before they changed me. Original family photographs, timestamp verified. Talks, Section 2. After they changed me. Doctored versions, side by side. Section 3. The charity. Posters, receipts, and captions that turned me into a tragedy. Section 4. The reflection. My self-portraits, from the mirror at 25 to now. At the top of the page, I wrote the title in careful cursive. The Truth. Remembers faces. The name came to me like a whisper from Aaron himself. For weeks I prepared. By day I cleaned the old shop, replaced broken bulbs, scrubbed away years of neglect until the air smelled less like decay and more like defiance. By night, I printed. Hundreds of photos, each labeled with real dates, exposure data, even the exact file path of the original. No one could call them memories anymore. They were records. When my fingers blistered from cutting and framing, I smiled. Pain was proof of creation. I wanted the exhibition to happen in the same neighborhood where the rumors had spread, where people whispered that I'd lost my mind. So I rented the small community hall next to the market, the one that usually hosted wedding banquets and school plays. The manager looked surprised. "A photo show? From you? I thought you'd retired." "Temporarily," I said. "Now I'm reopening." He chuckled. "You'll have to bring your own projector." "I will," I said, "and my own truth." The invitations came next. I didn't write opening night. I wrote, "Reconstruction of Memory, Public Viewing." I mailed them to everyone. Neighbors, relatives, journalists, even the local art college. And, most importantly, I hand-delivered one envelope to my granddaughter. She opened it with trembling hands. "Grandma, Mom says you're doing something dangerous." I smiled. "Truth isn't dangerous, love. It's just loud." She frowned. "Will there be pictures of us?" "Yes, but not the ones your mother made." I expected her to walk away. Instead, she whispered, "Can I come?" Her voice cracked a little on the last word. That was enough. Each photograph became a weapon and a wound. I wrote small captions under every one. Not poetic, not emotional, just factual. Photo 14, original file. Taken June 8, 2014, 3:42 p.m. Aaron Voss in natural light. No edits. Photo 14B. Manipulated copy. Uploaded June 2020. Background altered, subject replaced. Black and white. Cold truth. When I saw the side-by-side display on the wall, I felt both grief and triumph. This was my battlefield. Pixels against lies. The day before the opening, I bought an industrial-size projector and rented a wide white canvas. 4 meters by 3. That would be my final piece. The false memory. The infamous photo of me and my granddaughter. That wasn't born yet. I enlarged it until the pixels cracked like shattered glass. Then I printed the real version beside it. The same tree, the same garden, but empty. No child, no fantasy. When I aligned them, the difference screamed louder than any speech I could give. I stood back, hands trembling, and whispered to the air, "If they built my lie, I'll build my light." That night, while everyone else slept, I rehearsed. Not what to say. I didn't want speeches, but how to stand, how to look at them when the lights went on. I imagined the faces, the neighbors who pitied me, the relatives who doubted me, my daughter-in-law, flawless as ever, clutching her version of reality. I didn't want to humiliate her. I wanted to illuminate her. That's the thing about exposure. When light hits the negative, it doesn't lie. It reveals. Before going home, I locked the shop and paused by the mirror self-portrait now hanging by the door. The young woman looked back at me, half-shadowed, defiant. "I'm ready," I whispered. For the first time in months, my reflection didn't look like a stranger. The next morning, I printed the final banner and hung it outside the hall. Black letters on white canvas. When memory is edited, truth develops itself. People passing by stopped to read. Some frowned. Some smiled politely, not understanding. But they'd come. I knew it. The story of a mad woman with photographs was too tempting to ignore. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I did one last walkthrough. Rows of frames, soft light, no background music, just the steady hum of truth waiting to be seen. I adjusted the projector, aimed the lens at the 4x3 canvas, and whispered to myself, "They think they've controlled the narrative. But I own the negatives. The red power." Light blinked like a heartbeat. By then, my granddaughter arrived, nervous but smiling. She looked around at the photos and said softly, "They look real." "They are." She hesitated. "Will Mom be angry?" "Probably," I said. "But sometimes anger is just fear pretending to be brave." She nodded slowly. Then, without a word, she took my hand and helped me adjust the last frame. When I turned off the hall lights, the space glowed faintly under the projector beam. The images waiting, like witnesses in a courtroom. Outside, I could already hear people gathering. I checked the clock. 30 minutes until opening. Enough time for one last thought, one last vow. I looked at the massive blank screen, then at the photos that surrounded me. Hundreds of moments that had survived betrayal. And I said out loud, to no one in particular, "If they built a lie out of my memories, I'll project the truth, 4 meters high and 3 meters wide." The doors opened at 6. By 6:30, the room was full. Neighbors, former clients, 2 reporters from the local paper. Even the art college sent a group of photography students, whispering to each other like they were entering a museum of scandal. And in the third row, her. My daughter-in-law, immaculate as always, wearing a cream blazer and that same polite half-smile she used at funerals. Beside her sat my granddaughter, her hands folded tight on her lap. The lights dimmed. The projector hummed to life. A soft white beam cut through the darkness, landing on the first frame. Before they changed me. The first image appeared, a candid shot of Aaron at 12, holding his camera, squinting against the sun. Then, click, the edited version. His face brightened. My shadow gone. Another pair followed, and another, and another. No narration, no music. Just the quiet shifting of breaths in the room. Every photo came with a timestamp in white letters, original on the left, forged on the right. People leaned closer, whispering. Some gasped when they saw the differences, the subtle edits that rewrote years. You could hear recognition dawn like thunder rolling in slow motion. By the time the slideshow reached Family Picnic 2014, the room had gone completely still. There I was, smiling beside the granddaughter who, according to Time, did not exist yet. Someone muttered, "That's impossible." I didn't speak. The light did the talking. Halfway through the presentation, a voice cut through the silence. It was her. "This is outrageous," my daughter-in-law snapped, standing abruptly. Her chair scraped the floor. "She's twisting everything. You all know how digital files work. Anyone can fake timestamps." All eyes turned to her. The calm broke like glass. She gestured toward me, her tone rising, confident. "She's doing this to punish us. She's not well. These so-called originals, they're doctored. My husband, her son, would never have wanted this." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "But she's showing both versions. Why would she lie about her own deletion?" I stepped toward the front, letting the projector's light fall across half my face. "Please," I said softly, "let her speak. She's had years of practice." The crowd chuckled uneasily. Then I looked straight at her. "You say I'm unwell?" She stiffened. "You've been confused. It's understandable." I nodded. "Then confusion must be contagious, because time itself seems to have caught it." I turned to the audience. "I am 63 years old. I've spent more than half my life restoring other people's photographs. I know what restoration means. It means faithfulness. It means bringing back what was lost, not replacing it with what feels prettier." I pointed to the wall where Aaron's birthday photo hung, 2 versions side by side. "In this one," I said, "my son is alive. In that one, they've removed my hand from his shoulder. Tell me, which version looks better?" No one answered. "Which one feels true?" A woman in the back whispered, "The one with the hand." I smiled. "Exactly." My daughter-in-law stepped forward, voice trembling with rage. "You're humiliating me. This is smeared. Public defamation." I tilted my head. "No, this is development." "What?" I gestured toward the photos. "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just redeveloping what was already there. I'm washing off the chemicals you poured over the truth." The crowd stirred, people nodding. She looked around, realizing the shift. Her calm cracked. "You have no idea how much pain this will cause," she said, voice brittle. "You're tearing the family apart." "The family was torn," I said quietly, "when you sold it as a charity brand." Gasps erupted. The projector screen changed, and the next slide appeared. One of her fake Hearts for Heritage posters, complete with a watermark and donation link. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get that?" She whispered. "From your own USB, I said. "You left it in my shop. I just developed the file. You know, old habits." The murmurs turned into a low roar. Reporters scribbled. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered, "She made money off those pictures?" I turned back to the crowd. "Do you know what these people were told?" I said. "That I was dying of dementia. That my family was lovingly preserving my fading memories. They called it heritage work." I paused, letting the words settle. "Do you see dementia in these prints? Do you see confusion in this light?" No one answered. I pointed to the image behind me. The massive, infamous Family Picnic 2014 photograph. "This," I said, "is the lie they sold." Then the next slide, the real photo. The same garden, the same sunlight, but no child. "And this," I said, "is the truth they erased." The silence that followed was heavy, trembling. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum lower, as if respecting the gravity of the moment. My daughter-in-law's voice came out small now. "Why are you doing this to me?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I felt no anger, only a deep, tired clarity. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm doing this for him." I gestured toward Aaron's photo. The real one, untouched, slightly faded but warm. My son believed the camera never lies. "I'm just reminding the world why he was wrong, and why that matters. The lights dimmed again, and the final slide appeared. A quote. White text over black background. Beauty doesn't need to be brightened. It only needs to be honest. The audience broke into applause, hesitant at first, then steady, then thunderous. People stood. Reporters flashed photos, capturing me in front of my wall of truth. I saw my granddaughter wiping her eyes. She looked at me, mouthed something I couldn't hear. Maybe thank you, maybe I'm sorry. And then she did something unexpected. She walked up to me, took my hand, and faced the crowd with me. This, she said softly, is my grandmother. And she remembers everything. The room erupted again. My daughter-in-law turned toward the exit, face pale, the echo of applause chasing her out the door. I didn't stop her. Some people have to walk into their own silence before they hear the truth. When the crowd finally thinned, I sat alone in the center of the hall. The giant projection still glowed faintly, fading to white as the bulb overheated. It felt almost sacred. The way the light spilled across the floor, soft and forgiving. I thought of Aaron, of the day I first showed him how to load a roll of film. Never overexpose, I'd told him. Too much light kills the image. Now I smiled at the irony. Tonight, I had flooded everything with light, and instead of death, there was life. A reporter approached me as I was packing up. Mrs. Voss, she said gently, what do you hope people take away from this? I paused, holding a frame in my hands. Aaron's laugh, frozen mid-motion. That truth is not a weapon, I said, but it cuts just the same. And sometimes, you have to bleed a little to see clearly again. She nodded, scribbling, then added, what about your family? I smiled faintly. Families can forgive. But I won't let them retouch forgiveness either. As the lights went off one by one, I stood before the last glowing image, my mirror self-portrait from 25. The young woman in the frame stared back, half in light, half in darkness, just like me. I did it, I whispered. The reflection didn't smile, but the eyes, those eyes, glimmered like the flash of truth itself. When I stepped outside, the night air hit my face cool and clean. The streetlights hummed softly, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was walking out of a frame someone else had composed. No filters, no edits, just me, and the truth large enough for the whole world to see. The morning after the exhibition, the city looked newly washed, the kind of light that makes even cracked sidewalks look honest. When I opened the door, there were 2 newspapers lying on the mat. My name was on both. The woman who fought back with photographs. When memory refused to be edited, I laughed softly. For decades, I'd lived behind the camera. Now the camera had finally turned around. Inside, the shop smelled faintly of fixer and rain. Prints still hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly in the draft. A quiet choir of witnesses. By noon, the phone began ringing. Former clients, journalists, even strangers called to thank me. Some said I'd given them courage to revisit their own lost photographs. Your show was painful, but cleansing, one woman said, her voice trembling. She'd lost her husband last year. She told me she went home and deleted all the AI-edited portraits that had made him look too perfect. Thank you for reminding me, she whispered, that love already has the right exposure. After she hung up, I sat at my work table and cried. Not from sadness, but from a strange, weightless relief. For weeks my daughter-in-law stayed silent. No messages, no appearances, no lawsuits. Silence, I learned, can mean surrender. The donations from her fake foundation had been flagged. The charity page vanished overnight. Whispers in the neighborhood turned from suspicion to sympathy. Even Mrs. Hahn, who once pitied me, came by with a bag of oranges and said shyly, "You were right, Clara." The camera does tell the truth. Eventually, I smiled. Only when you let it. But the moment that mattered most came one rainy afternoon when I heard a knock at the door. It was her, my granddaughter. 16, shoulders trembling, hair damp from the drizzle. She stood there holding a photograph. The mirror portrait from when I was 25. "Grandma," she said softly, "I borrowed this from the exhibit. I wanted to give it back myself." She handed it to me carefully, as though it were alive. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry. For believing what Mom said. For reposting the pictures. For forgetting to ask you what was real." I brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "You were just looking through someone else's lens. Now you've got your own." She bit her lip, eyes glassy. "Grandma," she said, "they called you crazy online. But now everyone calls you," she smiled faintly, "T. the photographer of memory." The words landed softly but deep, like film touching developer fluid. We walked into the living room together. The mirror photograph now hung in the center wall, freshly framed, no glass, no glare. I'd refused to retouch it, even to remove the dust specks on the negative. "Why this one?" she asked. "Because it's the only picture no one can edit," I said. A photo inside a photo. I'd already taken it before they even thought of rewriting me. She lived closer. "You were beautiful." I smiled. I was honest. Later, she helped me rearrange the shop, turning it from a workspace into something between a gallery and a classroom. We stacked recovered prints into folders labeled Truth, Memory, and Light. When she finished, she turned to me and said, "Can you teach me how to develop film?" I nodded, feeling a warmth I hadn't felt in years. "It's simple," I told her. "All you need is patience and darkness that doesn't lie." We stood side by side under the dim red bulb as the first photo appeared in the tray. A faint outline, then shapes, then a face. Her eyes widened. "It's like magic." "No," I said quietly, "it's truth taking its time." That night, after she left, I sat alone in the glow of the red lamp. The mirror photo hung above me, casting its reflection in the darkroom glass. The young woman in the picture and the old woman beneath it shared the same stillness. Both unretouched, both alive. For years, I'd believed I was fading, becoming obsolete in a world obsessed with filters and illusions. But maybe I hadn't been fading. Maybe I'd just been developing. Slowly. Quietly. In my own dark room of grief and grace. When the shop finally closed that night, I turned off the red bulb and looked once more at the mirror portrait. In the faint afterglow, the girl's face blurred into mine. Not gone, not replaced, just finally complete. Somewhere in that silence I heard Aaron's voice again. Soft and teasing. "Don't forget to sign your work, Mom." I smiled, picked up a fine brush, and wrote beneath the frame, "Restored by the photographer of memory." Then I turned off the light. 1 year later, the light in my life changed again. Not brighter, just steadier. The shop no longer smelled of fixer and regret. It smelled of tea, dust, and possibility. I had renamed it True Frame Atelier, the studio of honest photographs. Women began to come, quietly at first, then in pairs, then in groups. They weren't clients, they were survivors of manipulation, of silence, of erasure. Each carried a box of photographs, yellowed and bruised, stories half told. There was Elena, who brought her wedding album that her ex-husband had edited to remove her scars. Mai, who had never been in any family pictures because she was always behind the camera. And Ruth, 74, who whispered, "They cropped my sister out of every photo after she came out. I want her back." I listened. I didn't promise miracles. I simply said, "We'll start with the truth." We worked slowly. No filters, no retouching tools. Just hands, scanners, brushes, patience. For hours, the atelier hummed softly. Scissors cutting, paper rustling, the gentle rhythm of restoration. Sometimes, the women cried when their images came back to life. Not because of nostalgia, but because, for once, they saw themselves unedited. One day, Elena pointed at her photo and whispered, "I thought I hated my face." I handed her the print, warm from the dryer. "You just never saw it undeleted." Above the main table, I'd hung the same mirror photograph I took when I was 25. The girl staring back at me through cracked light, half in shadow, half defiant. Under it, a new plaque read, "She captured once. Now she is seen." Every woman who entered the atelier paused before it. Some smiled, Some touched the glass lightly, as if it might pulse. To me, that photo had stopped being proof of who I was. It had become a doorway, a reminder that even reflections deserve witnesses. Sometimes journalists visited. They wrote articles about the mad photographer turned teacher. But I didn't correct them anymore. Madness, I'd learned, was just what the world calls clarity when it's inconvenient. When they asked what I taught, I said, not photography. Recognition. My granddaughter, now 17, became my apprentice. She had a quiet steadiness about her, the kind Erin once had. Her laughter filled the studio like sunlight breaking through old glass. One afternoon, she found a folder marked Unfinished Frames. "What's this?" she asked. "Photos that were never printed," I said. People gave up halfway, said it wasn't worth it. She held up a negative to the light, squinting. "You can still see the outline." "That's all you need," I smiled. "Truth doesn't need much light, just enough to find itself." By late summer, the atelier had become more than a workshop. It was a confession booth without religion, a courtroom without verdicts. Women came to reclaim their names in pixels and paper. We made an exhibit together, untouched. Women restoring themselves. Each photo hung with a handwritten note, not about who took it, but who finally saw it. When people asked me why I opened this place, I said, because memory is only sacred when it belongs to the one who lived it. One day, as we were cleaning up, my granddaughter found an old box tucked behind the cabinet. Inside were the fragments of the slideshow from that cursed memorial. The glossy prints my daughter-in-law had once curated. "Do you want me to throw these away?" she asked. I looked at them. The fake smiles, the forced sunlight, the edited ghosts. "No," I said softly, "we'll keep them. Not as lies, as lessons." She nodded, slid them back into the box, and labeled it in neat handwriting. Evidence of editing. I smiled. The name fit. Every Friday, when the workshop ended and the women went home, I sat alone by the mirror photo. I'd brew jasmine tea, turn off the main lights, and let the atelier sink into a golden half-dark. That was my favorite hour, the blue hour, photographers call it. The time when light is neither gone nor staying, just honest about its impermanence. Sometimes I'd talk to Erin then. Not out loud, just quietly in my chest. "You were right, my boy," I'd say. "The camera doesn't lie. People do. But even lies can teach us how to frame the truth." And in those moments, I almost heard his laugh again. Not from the speakers, not from memory, but from somewhere inside the light. A few months later, an invitation arrived. The National Art Museum wanted to host The Truth Remembers Faces as a permanent exhibit. I hesitated at first. I didn't want to become a spectacle again. But then I thought of the women in my class, of all the photos that had finally been seen. It wasn't my story anymore. It was ours. At the opening ceremony, I stood before the same 4x3-meter projection. This time not in anger, but in gratitude. People clapped. Cameras flashed. And for once, I didn't flinch at the light. After the event, a young reporter asked, "Mrs. Voss, what changed for you after all this?" I looked around. At the gallery, at the mirror photo now hanging on its own pedestal, at my granddaughter waving from the back. "What changed?" I repeated. "Everything. And nothing. I'm still developing, just not in the dark anymore." She smiled, confused. "Developing what?" "Myself." Now, when I teach, I begin every class with the same sentence. Before you take a picture, ask yourself, are you capturing someone or are you seeing them? The women always pause at that. Then they smile because they understand the difference. Sometimes I walk through the atelier late at night when everyone's gone. The mirror photo still hangs there, the plaque beneath it shining faintly. She captured once. Now she is seen. I stand in front of it, and for a split second the reflection blurs. The young woman and the old woman merge into one continuous exposure. That's when I know. I was never erased. I was just waiting for the right light to print myself properly. Outside, the city hums. Traffic lights flicker red and gold, and somewhere, cameras keep clicking, trying to trap beauty into boxes. But I've learned beauty doesn't need trapping. It needs releasing, just like truth. Before closing the atelier one night, my granddaughter called out from the doorway, "Grandma, when did you know the story was over?" I looked up from my desk, smiled, and said, "When I realized it wasn't about revenge, it was about focus." She tilted her head. "Focus?" "Yes," I said. "Not what you see, but what you choose to keep sharp." When she left, I turned off the lights and stared at the mirror one last time before locking up. The surface caught the faint moonlight, soft and forgiving. The reflection was neither old nor young, just true. And that, I thought, was the best exposure of all. If one day you open an old album, maybe on a dusty shelf, maybe in a forgotten folder online, and see yourself standing in a moment you don't remember living through, don't panic. Don't rush to delete it. Don't ask who edited it or why. Just look closer. Look at the way the light falls, at the corner of your smile, at the reflection hiding behind you. Maybe that's not a glitch. Maybe that's an invitation. Maybe it's the universe whispering, "It's time to make your own print from your own negative." Because somewhere along the way, all of us let someone else hold the camera. We let lovers crop our worth. We let family retouch our memories. We let the world filter our faces until even we stopped recognizing them. But truth, like film, survives in the dark. It waits. It remembers. I spent years letting others develop. Me, softer, quieter, smaller, prettier. They called it protection. They called it love. But it was just overexposure. Then one day, I picked up my own camera. And I learned that no one else can frame the life you're meant to live. That's what True Frame Atelier became. Not a studio, but a mirror. A place for women to reprint the parts of themselves they'd let fade. Some came carrying grief, some came carrying guilt, and some came with only a shoebox of torn photos and a whisper, "I don't even know who I am in these anymore." We restored the pictures together. But more than that, we restored the women inside them. So if you're reading this now, somewhere between exhaustion and hope, if you've been told your memory is wrong, your version unreliable, your light too dim, don't believe them. The camera may not lie, but people do. And you have every right to expose them. You have every right to hold the negatives of your own life and say, "This is what happened. This is what I saw. This is what I remember." Because memory isn't about accuracy. It's about ownership. When I look back now at all the women who've walked through my door, with trembling hands and scanned hearts, I realize every one of them taught me the same quiet truth. Healing doesn't mean restoring the picture to what it used to be. It means printing it as it truly is, scratches, blur, and all. So here's my invitation to you. Go find your old photographs. The ones you keep hidden because the people in them changed, or left, or lied. Hold them up to the light. Ask yourself, what would this image look like if I removed everyone else's edits? Maybe you'll find something raw, imperfect, and breathtakingly honest. Maybe you'll find you. And if you do, tell someone, show someone, or simply share this story. Because who knows? Somewhere out there, someone else might be living inside a photo they never agreed to pose for. Someone else might be waiting for permission to take the camera back. Let this be that permission. For years, I feared the light. Now, I chase it. Not because it flatters me, but because it doesn't lie. The last time I stood in the dark room, my granddaughter watching from the doorway, I pressed the button on the enlarger and whispered to myself, "Develop." And as the image bloomed into view, my own face, unfiltered, unborrowed, I realized something so simple it almost hurt. The truth isn't what we see. It's what finally sees us back. If this story found you, let it travel further. Share it. Not for me, but for the woman who still thinks she's a blur in someone else's frame. Share it for the men who erase themselves trying to be forgiven. Share it for anyone who's ever looked at a photograph and felt like a ghost. Because maybe, just maybe, they're ready to come back into focus.